It is going well, despite some other social media that have discouraged some people. But generally speaking, I think people are coming out now, getting the facts about the vaccine.
Tonight, COVID-19 vaccine concerns shared online.
Secondly, we're also going to be vaccinating people who are 70 and over.
The vaccination rollout for First Nations in Manitoba.
I was fully expecting an armed response to the election results.
And reaction to the rioting in Washington, D.C. Good evening. Welcome to APTN National News. I'm Dennis Ward. Mass vaccinations have begun in the Cree communities in Quebec, but a former AFN chief is expressing concern on social media that the vaccine is not safe. Jamie Pashagumskum brings us reaction.
To the relief of many, the vaccination started this week in the Cree community of Mistassini. But former Grand Chief of the Crees and Mistassini resident Matthew Kuncum recently took to social media condemning the vaccination. Kuncum warns, "It is a shame that the citizens of our community were not asked what they thought of this decision. Leadership seems to think they know what is best for us. Mistassini is now the experimental rats of this experimental vaccine." Moderna says its vaccine was tested on humans. It has since been approved for use by independent health bodies, Canada, and other countries around the world. Kuncum declined an interview request regarding his views, but his comments prompted a lengthy discussion on social media. Meanwhile, current Grand Chief Abel Bozum was in Mistassini for the first vaccinations. He says he and his family will be getting the shot once it comes to his community of Ujabugamu, where one resident announced on social media Thursday that he has COVID-19. In his post, Jeremy Polson urged anyone who came in contact with him to get tested. He described his symptoms as, "Picture the worst cold or flu you've had, and times that by 4 to 5 times." Bozum says getting vaccinated is a choice.
Up to now, I think we have about 400 that have been vaccinated. It is going well, despite some other social media that have discouraged some people. But generally speaking, I think people are coming out now, getting the facts about the vaccine and are participating. So that was good news to hear from the public health and from the chief of Mistassini.
Thomas Neposh is the chief of Mistassini. He was the second person vaccinated, and he experienced no side effects. Neposh hopes Kuncum's comments won't discourage people from vaccination.
I know people are entitled to their own opinion, and he's entitled to it. And for me, I'd rather rely on factual, scientific and medical advice. So that's where we stand. So we want to encourage people to take on a vaccine because it's for their safety and health, and so it's the people around them and in our community.
The remaining 12,000 Moderna vaccination doses will arrive in the Cree Nation next week, where the hope is to vaccinate the entire population of 18 years and up, if they're willing. Jamie Pashagumskum, APTN National News, Ottawa.
The first doses of the Moderna COVID-19 vaccine are headed to First Nations communities in Manitoba this morning. The province has allotted 5,300 doses to be sent to First Nations across the province. An additional 5,300 will be going out next month. For more, we're joined by Southern Chiefs Organization Grand Chief Jerry Daniels to talk about how these vaccines will roll out. Grand Chief Daniels, thanks so much for being with us. With 5,300 doses going out this week, that'll reach a pretty small portion of the population. Can you tell us who will be receiving the vaccinations?
Well, we advocated very strongly that every single First Nation is reached in the first round of vaccinations, which wasn't the case in the beginning. So we wanted to ensure that we would be able to do that. And so when we looked at the numbers, we're able to vaccinate, I think, everyone who's involved with the healthcare system, so everyone who's all the nurses and health people in our communities. Secondly, we're also going to be vaccinating people who are 70 and over. And then in February, we'll be vaccinating 60 and over in communities. And we've also heard from the province that our First Nation citizens who are living in urban areas, the age requirement for the first round of vaccination will be at an earlier age, given the disproportionate healthcare outcomes for First Nations.
How long until we can expect to see needles in the arms?
Well, I think that they're going to be rolling it out, I think, even today from what I'm hearing, and tomorrow, but for sure Monday is what we've heard in terms of starting to really ramp up.
You know, given the way that the vaccinations need to be stored and lockdowns and everything, can you describe the logistics of getting these vaccines to the communities?
Well, it's a matter of ensuring we have the right people in the community who can, who know how to store and handle the Moderna vaccine initially. I know there's now talk of the Pfizer vaccine being distributed a little more widely, given that there has been some indication that it can be transported in a better, more safer way, so that there's so that the vaccine won't be obstructed in any way, and that'll still be useful, still be very effective.
The province is saying another 5,300 doses will be going out next month. Will that extend who's eligible for the vaccination?
Well, we based our our conversations around trying to expand it so that every community would be involved in this first round of vaccinations. We didn't want any one of our communities being left out of this. And so what that did was that changed the criteria. Initially, we were thinking 60 and over, but because of the very limited amount of vaccines available, we had to make changes to 70 over. Then, and that's only within the first month. The first stage of the vaccine is actually between now and March, and so our goal here is that everybody 60 and over will be vaccinated by the end of March.
First Nations people account for half the active cases in the province of Manitoba right now. What is the impact of getting these doses out?
Well, it's going to give us peace of mind to know that our knowledge keepers, our people who are most vulnerable are going to be protected, and hopefully we can save every single life possible. And that was the intent of our advocacy efforts, and that's why we immediately called for First Nations to be prioritized. And not only in our communities, but we've also pushed to have our First Nations people prioritized in urban centers, where we're saying 60 and over, given the life expectancy is almost 11 years for First Nations, and also the impacts that we were seeing in the hospitals, where we had a disproportionate representation of First Nations being hospitalized and in ICUs.
Well, Grand Chief, good to hear the vaccines getting out there. Appreciate you taking some time for us here today.
Thank you.
For 10 months, Nunavut health officials have urged Nunavummiut to avoid non-essential travel to avoid the spread of COVID-19. But new information today shows that for some senior health department officials, that could be a case of do as I say, not as I do. Nunavut government took questions from reporters today and admitted that senior health officials have been traveling out of the territory. We asked the health minister if his own senior staff aren't following public health advice. Why should the rest of Nunavummiut?
I don't know how many. There might be one, there might be two. And I still do not know at this point if the reasons they left were for medical or otherwise. So, as I said, I'm looking into that right now, and we'll see what happens from there. In light of that, we are still encouraging everybody to listen to the rules. I'm looking into the situation, and for me to say that they left for non-medical and non-necessary travel, I can't say that at this time.
Coming up, reaction to yesterday's storming of the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. Stay with us. Welcome back. It was a day unlike any other ever witnessed in the United States. Unprecedented violence and terror that ended up leading to 4 deaths. Members of the Trump mob literally climbing the walls of the Capitol to try to get inside. Hundreds clashing with police and security. Officials say 3 people died from medical emergencies, but a 4th was shot and killed after she managed to get inside. The lawmakers and staff members were hiding under tables and hunkered in lockdowns. U.S. President-elect Joe Biden is calling the violent group that descended on the U.S. Capitol on Wednesday domestic terrorists. And many, including Biden, are questioning the response by law enforcement to the rioters. Jacqueline Keeler is a Dene Ihangtuan Dakota journalist based in Portland, Oregon. She joins us now. Jackie, thanks for joining us. What was going through your mind as you watched the violence in Washington unfold?
Yeah, I was absolutely, I'd like to say I was shocked, but I was expecting this. Having studied the Bundys and the armed militia movement for 4 years now, working on my book Standoff, I was fully expecting an armed response to the election results.
You and I both spent a considerable amount of time in Standing Rock and couldn't help but go through my mind watching this. What did you make of the response by law enforcement as thousands stormed the Capitol building?
Yeah, I think it's pretty evident. People have been sharing photos of what the response was when the National Guard was called in before nonviolent Black Lives Matter protesters came to the Capitol. They were called in before the protesters even arrived, and here there were plenty of chatter on right-wing, far-right places like Telegram and places like that, showing that they were planning this. And so there was really no, and I knew that both the Georgia election runoffs, Senate runoffs, and also the certification of Biden's win would be flashpoints. I'd have to say. I didn't expect it to go this far. I expected this more on Inauguration Day on January 20th.
As you said, you've studied and looked into militias for your upcoming book. You've also expressed your concern about what the invasion of the Capitol means for Representative Deb Haaland, who is set to become the first Native American Interior Secretary. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I have been very concerned. Looking at the Bundys and the far rights, this goes back to the 70s and the Sagebrush Rebellion. Sort of Cliven Bundy was part of that group, the patriarch of the Bundy family, and a lot of the issues being brought up regarding the BLM, the Bureau of Land Management, will be directly impacted by Representative Deb Haaland's oversight if she is confirmed as Secretary of the Interior. And so she will, I worry about it because they are armed. They have gotten wins or concessions that have been granted to them by the Trump administration. BLM offices have been made more localized, where they can be subjected to more influence by local populations of rural folks. And so she will probably undo that, which will cause a lot of, she will get a lot of heat for that, quite frankly, and I am concerned.
Jackie, a little under 2 weeks left of the Trump presidency. Are you anticipating more unrest in the coming days?
Oh, yes, I am. I mean, there is talk of invoking, I know that Representative Sharice Davids from Kansas, a citizen of the Ho-Chunk Nation, has stated that she wishes the 25th Amendment, the 25th be invoked in order to, to take Trump out of office for the remaining 13 days, and it would be up to of course, his own staff to decide to do that, his administration, so his cabinet to make that choice. But it would probably be in the best interest, because already someone has died, bled to death in a Trump flag in the Capitol building, and it's astounding, absolutely astounding, and someone who had served in the military and had been misled by the accusations that the election is fraudulent. And in my book, I go into a lot of the history, why this is so appealing to colonists, to white colonists, because of the history of the United States based in land acquisition and white supremacy. I think, and of course the Bundys, in the book I compare the philosophy of the Bundy family to that of my own family, my grandmother's family, the Deloria family, and their philosophy that helped to sort of guide some of the stuff that happened at Standing Rock, particularly the writing of her cousin, my grandmother's cousin, Vi Deloria Jr., who wrote Custer Died for Your Sins. And so I try to do a family-to-family philosophical historical comparison, and of an indigenous family versus a colonial family. And so, and definitely the way the Bundys talk, a lot of the history they're referencing goes all the way back to the English Civil War. They're talking about the closing of the Commons. Of course, their surname Bundy comes from is one of the translations is bound servitude, where from feudal days, Anglo-Saxon days, you would bind yourself to a feudal lord, and then in Norman times that became actual serfdom, where the Bundys were bound to the land, and when the lord inherited the land, he inherited the Bundys. So it was, and here they could become landowners, which they could not do in England. And so, of course, their take on history is very different. They think the sheriff is the most powerful person in the world within the county boundaries, and so hence their appeals to sheriffs. And there are a lot of sheriffs that believe this in the United States, that they have the ultimate power within their county that actually is greater than that of Congress and of the president. And so it's the actual cooperation almost of law enforcement is not surprising, because so many members of law enforcement and the military have been basically become members of this movement. And so it's not, there are photos of them taking selfies and with the armed insurgents.
Well, Jackie, looking forward to your book and interesting days ahead for sure. Appreciate you taking some time for us here.
Yeah, no problem.
To Edmonton now, where jury selection began today for the manslaughter trial of Bradley Barton. In 2015, Barton was acquitted of first-degree murder in the death of Cindy Gladue. The trial made national headlines with protests across the country. Edmonton-based video journalist Chris Stewart has the latest, and a warning: this story contains graphic information and may not be suitable for everyone.
It's been nearly a decade since Cindy Gladue's body was found in a bathtub at an Edmonton motel room. She had bled to death. Her vaginal wall had an 11-centimeter wound. Cindy Gladue was a 36-year-old Cree mother of 3. Circumstances forced her to sell her body to survive. Trucker Bradley Barton was charged with her murder. He had picked her up for sex. On their second morning together, she was dead. Barton said Cindy Gladue's death was an accident, and the sex was consensual. Barton's first-degree murder trial in 2015 caused headlines by becoming the first case in Canadian history of a victim's vagina being dissected and used as evidence. This sparked outrage and protests. Advocates called it a human indignity and said it would not have happened if she was not Indigenous. During the trial, Gladue was repeatedly referred to as a native and prostitute dozens of times. The jury acquitted Barton of first-degree murder. In a rare move, the Alberta Supreme Court ordered a retrial. The court ruled that Gladue's past sexual history should not have been used as evidence, as there was no separate hearing to determine if it was admissible. Today, jury selection begins. It is not open to the public or media. Barton's trial for manslaughter begins on Monday, and I will be keeping up with the developments. Chris Stewart, APTN National News, Edmonton.
Time for another quick break, but stick around. There's more to come. Welcome back. Time now for our photo of the day. Here's the scene of a winter day that was sent to us by Val Kirby. Pictured there are some horses enjoying a morning meal. Appreciate that photo, Val. Thanks for sending that in. And you can send us your photos. You can email your shot to share@aptn.ca, and we'll do our best to get them on the air. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Starting on the east coast, +4 with showers for St. John's, -1 in snow in Halifax, 5 below in Nain, -16 for Kuujjuaq, -3 under sunny skies in Montreal, 11 below for Chibougamau, -2 and sunny in Toronto, -5 for Sault Ste. Marie, 0 in Thunder Bay, -1 in Sioux Lookout, -5 in God's Lake, 3 below and sunny for Norway House, snow and 1 below in Winnipeg, 0 in Dauphin. +1 with snow for Regina, -4 and sunny in North Battleford, -1 in La Ronge, 4 below in Meadow Lake. Over to northern Alberta, -2 and sunny in Fort McMurray, -12 in Grand Prairie, -1 in Edmonton and Calgary, +1 in Medicine Hat. +7 with showers for Vancouver, 8 above and rain in Victoria. 0 for Smithers, -2 with snow in Prince George. -26 in Old Crow, 7 below in Whitehorse. -13 for Yellowknife, 15 below in Norman Wells. -15 for Sax Harbor, 10 below in Paulatuck. Snow and 22 below for Whale Cove and Chesterfield. -24 in Resolute, 25 below in Joe Haven. Over to Ottawa now, where the host of Nation to Nation has a preview of what's coming up on tonight's show.
Hello. On the show tonight, we take a look ahead at the AFN in 2021. With Perry Bellegarde not running again as national chief, there'll be a new one elected this summer, virtually. I speak to First Nations scholar Nigon Sinclair. He says if chiefs will be voting virtually, why not grassroots people? It could change the way the AFN does business.
Because the AFN would then have a model to be able to represent First Nations interests, not the interests of program delivery model from the federal government.
And I speak to NDP MP Leah Gazan. Her private member's bill wants an emergency declared over the climate crisis. That's happening in a matter of minutes. I'll see you then.
Looks good. That's your APTN National News for this Thursday. For news anytime, visit our website, aptnnews.ca. Thanks for tuning in. Stick around. Nation to Nation with Todd Lamran's up next. I'm Dennis Ward. We'll see you back here tomorrow.